Hello, Courier-Record viewers. This is Billy Colburn of the Courier-Record newspaper. This is interview number 3 in our series of sit-down interviews with the candidates for Nottoway County Board of Supervisors, Nottoway constitutional officers, Nottoway school board members. Today we're meeting with Sonny Abbott. Right now, just for context, it is Wednesday, August 30th at 10:54 a.m. These interviews are paid for by the candidate. Just make that clear. This is paid time. There's been no discussion or agreement on any questions or even topics. And so with that, we welcome Sonny Abbott to the Courier-Record studio. Mr. Abbott, how are you doing today?
Doing fine, sir.
Great. Why is Sonny Abbott running for the school board? You have been very outspoken. I've had a number of people say, I'm surprised he's not running for the Board of Supervisors. He's such a budget hawk. Why the school board?
Well, predominantly because of the change due to redistricting. I went from District 3 to District 2. Now, I supported a number of the candidates that currently sit on the school board, and some of those folks have chosen not to run again. The other is that when you're in the audience, you're not always given the same opportunity to get an answer that you might be able to get if you were sitting in the other chair.
Very good.
So if you were sitting on the board, you could be one of those that would be encouraging citizens to ask questions and willing to research whatever is necessary to provide that citizen an answer.
You have made it fairly clear at meetings of both the school board and Board of Supervisors, you have a tendency to ask questions and not get answers. Would that be fair to say?
Except for the beginning few months of this calendar year and the last few months of last year, there was an attempt by the then board chairman of the Board of Supervisors to answer questions. They would answer some of them, not all. The school board rarely answers a question.
Understood. What do you observe as the best parts of Nottoway County Public Schools today, the strongest parts as well as the weakest parts of the division from your observations? You go to most all the meetings.
Going to the meetings, you learn a number of things, but talking to your neighbors and friends and associates and people you run into on the street, you learn that the primary schools, generally speaking, Crew Primary and Blackstone Primary, Crew Primary being the leader, have the best performance of being able to educate children. It seems to dissipate after the primary level. The high school level has a very poor representation in math and English. And unfortunately, when you're at that level, your next few steps are into the general public. And if you have a difficulty with math, if you have a difficult with English, and part of that English would be reading, are you truly prepared for your next steps?
Right, whatever they may be. If you were successful in the election, what are your top 2 or 3 goals the minute you take office? Do you have a plan? Are there motions you want to make coming out of the gate?
Well, the first that I would like to see is I've listened to the superintendent remind the board that they are responsible for 3 basic elements: the budget, governance, and hiring and firing a superintendent. Well, the 2 primary issues, as I see it, are governance and the budget. We, as taxpayers, through the federal, state, and local, provide somewhere between $26 and $30 million. And I'm okay with that. My problem is how it's spent. And without someone monitoring and being involved in the development of a budget, you don't always know how it's spent. The other is that recently, I think it's the beginning of this school year, we've finally been able to expand our vocational training to include Southside Community College,
yes,
in addition to ANTC. And I always wonder why. Why has it taken so long? Why is it that ANTC can hire teachers to teach those HVAC, electrical, building trades, welding, and so on? How can they get them and we can't? We can't in Nottoway. We haven't been able to fund one of those organizations as ANTC. It just doesn't happen.
Just to be clear, I think you're just, not to contradict you, I think you're saying why does SVCC get them and then ANTC cannot?
Correct.
Right, okay, so make sure we're clear on that.
It amazes me that the community college has a staff with a multitude of courses, and fortunately, we have someone in the system that was able to get some spaces for our students to go into those programs. I have said all along, if you have 150 kids that graduate from high school, and I know we didn't have that many, but
Right.
just using that as a number, if 50 of them go on to some other form of schooling, whether they go to college or a trade school or some other form of education, that leaves 100 kids to do what?
That's the best.
So
Yeah.
the problem is that if we could give them some opportunities, it might help them, assist them in a multitude of ways of finding employment, because I don't think they're all going to want to stay at home until they're in their mid-20s. The other one primary thing is to attempt to reintroduce what I call shop and home economics back into the high school, something that was removed a number of years ago. Home ec and shop courses, so that you get the initial interest. And home ec isn't just trying to figure out how to cook. It has a lot more to do with how you run a household. And eventually, all of those students will end up attempting to run a household.
That is true. Well, let me ask you this: you probably no citizen has been more actively involved, at least trying to watch the budget as you. Are Nottoway County Public Schools today overfunded, underfunded, or properly funded?
Well, I'm going to have to say they're properly funded. The unfortunate part about that is how you spend the money. The school system has been able to get the money. The county has been able to raise the money that they seem to need. How they go about doing it is different than the school system, because the school system can't tax.
Right.
So the school system has to rely on how the federal government, the Commonwealth, and the local effort match monies. Now that's an algorithm that I don't think anybody understands.
With the composite index, with the real estate tax base and that sort of thing.
With all of the kinds of things,
Right.
Because when you call or get information from the folks in Virginia that handle the budget, you can get a number. They will give you one. It doesn't always match what the school asks for, but you can get one. As I say, it requires involvement. The current board, and I consider some of them my friends, don't have an in-depth knowledge of the development or the execution of the budget.
You come from the private sector where you dealt with many zeros from our conversations.
A substantial side of budgets when it came to the work that I was responsible for.
One of the biggest things, Mr. Abbott, we've seen, heard, witnessed, teacher vacancies, teacher shortages. What would you do? Do you have any plans that you would go about addressing not only keeping the teachers we have, but recruiting new teachers not only? We hear at board meetings, we can't get anybody because other counties are offering sign-on bonuses or better insurance. Do you have a plan to reverse that tide?
Well, I'm not sure that I can reverse it, but I can impact it. Not too many months ago, I offered at a public delegation the opportunity to change things in a couple of different ways. We have given out 2 bonuses this past school year. Why a bonus? Why not convert that to base salary so that everyone receives a little in their base salary, but when you get the raise, you're multiplying by a different number. So eventually, it grows greater than the one-time budget. Now understand that it's always nice to get a check so that you have some additional money to do other things with. But that long range, I also proposed a 4-year incentive plan to hire teachers, to start them at a little higher bonus and decrease it over 4 years. And if they left during any of that period of time, they have to pay back all the money.
Right.
Now, the unfortunate part about that is teachers who have 5, 6, 7 years said, well, I didn't get that money, so why should I support it? Well, you should support it because it will keep and retain teachers. I will submit to you, they got a retention bonus not too long ago. Did it work?
Apparently.
No, it didn't.
Right.
It's easy to see that teachers become free agents at the end of the school year. So for a period of time, they can choose to go someplace else. Your competitive newspaper out of Amelia showed a picture of I believe all of the teachers in that system. And when you read some of their biographies, guess where they taught? They taught in Nottoway.
Oh.
Now they're teaching in Amelia.
That seems to be a trend that Nottoway is the start of school and they go elsewhere.
So the other is that we have a number of PhDs in our system, and I appreciate that. I'm happy that we have that many, but they all came out of a university. They got those PhDs somewhere. Why is it that they can't go back to those universities? I was told once that in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we graduate 16,000 students every year from college. We can't get 5 or 10 of those folks to want to come to Nottoway?
Fair point, fair point. One trend we've noticed, and it may not just be a Nottoway trend, but it seems that, and this may be a factor in your race, it seems that a lot of times school board members happen to be current educators, sometimes in the division or neighboring divisions, or they're retired educators. Do you feel that trend, and sometimes as many as 2 or 3 of the 5 board members may be educators, do you think that's good because they're closer to the subject area, or might they have tunnel vision and not have the outside experience needed to govern?
Well, you can look at it a lot of different ways. It gives them some benefit because they know the inside of the system. As an outsider, I don't have children in school. My children are all grown.
Right.
So you can see the inside. They know what's there. They were either teachers or substitutes, but they understand the inside of what goes on. But I submit to you, if you look at those who have been from the inside, what's changed? If things haven't progressed to the extent that we all would hope that they could, that might not be one of the benefits that makes change different. I think that these board members require people who have been in leadership positions, who understand on how to get something done, how to achieve an objective, how to set the standard, and how to make things happen.
What life experiences and qualifications, in your opinion, make you the best candidate at this time in Nottoway County history for the District 2 school board seat?
Well, I never consider myself the best. I consider myself a candidate along with everyone else. I am not better or worse than anybody else that's running for office, and I truly appreciate that. My history says that I went to a public school, so I jokingly say I was uneducated at a public school. I then went into the military. When I got out of the military, it was because of family circumstance. I lost my father. I got a job. I went to work for the Ford Motor Company, manufacturing. I started as a clerk. Years later, I was a plant manager. So I worked my way up that channel. I went to college part-time, completed a degree, attended graduate school. All of my goals that I set for myself, I achieved. And I always consider myself fortunate because I retired. But after retirement, I was called back to work numerous times to solve serious situations in other manufacturing entities. So I always felt like they must have thought I had a decent track record because they asked me to come back to resolve some of those issues.
Let's see how much time we have left here, folks. Oh, we're fine. Is there any you know, not always a small community. We have social media, and you hear people, like I say, you're out and about, you talk to people. Is there a misconception about Sonny Abbott that you'd like to address? Have you ever heard anybody characterize you, or heard that someone's characterized you? So that's not me. Is there a mischaracterization?
Oh yeah, I was once called a cult leader. That I had a cult.
Who's a cult?
I had to look up what a cult leader was, because I've never been called a cult leader before. I've been called a lot of things, but never a cult leader. And that was by a person in office. I think it was because I was supporting several folks for office. This is a number of years ago,
right?
And that I had cult followers. Well, I can't even think that I have anyone that follows me. I don't think that I'm held in high regard in any circles, or that I'm looked down upon. I'm just somebody that attends meetings, attempts to be fact-based. If I make a mistake and they can prove it to me and show it to me, I'll admit that I was wrong. And I'll change my viewpoint based on that. But if they can't do that, if they can't show me where I was wrong, then I was more than likely right. And many of the questions that I ask, either at the board or at the school board, I hope it raises a level of interest so that those who sit in the seats that make those decisions, would see that a decision needs to be made.
Last question, tough question, but students are graded. Would you care to give a grade for the current school board of the current term? Because you were active in supporting several candidates in 2019. What letter grade would you give the current board?
I'd give them a C.
Okay.
Average.
Okay.
If you go to individual persons on the board, that grade would change.
Correct. I didn't ask you to be right.
But as a total, I would say it's average.
And what's your take on how Nottoway weathered the COVID storm? How do you think of course, obviously the school board was governed in many ways by the state, but how would you assess Nottoway's handling of COVID?
Poorly, simply poorly, because we shut schools down. And all of the statistics that they show now show how there was learning loss, substantial amounts of learning loss over those periods of times where the children were now trying to do it virtually. And though it may have worked for some kids, because some kids are driven that way, they enjoy doing those kinds of things, but the majority of children didn't seem to do well. And I think that's seen in our SOL scores today.
Very good. Folks, you've heard from Sonny Abbott. Early voting in Nottoway County starts Friday, September 22nd. The general election is November 7th. Mr. Abbott again is running for the school board in District 2. That's what we technically call the Crew area. That district now is basically one half of the town of Crew and areas eastward. If you don't know where to vote, now is the time to call the registrar's office in Burford or email the registrar, Rodney Reynolds, at vote@nottoway.org. Again, early voting starts in 3 weeks. This video has been paid for by Mr. Abbott, but there's been no agreement on content. It will be posted within 24 hours of it being taken, and we appreciate you tuning in. Thank you very much, and everybody be safe.